6:30. The date is Wednesday, March 27th, 2024. Commissioner Jim Franklin is absent today, and Commissioner Buzz Artiano is also absent. I will now open the meeting and take a roll call. Kalina Vendetti is here. Dot McFarland?
Yes.
Megan Hickey?
Yes.
And Marilyn Kozador?
Yes.
And that constitutes a quorum. Thank you. Please note that we're doing a hybrid meeting with in-person and virtual attendance. If a member of the virtual public would like to make a comment during a public hearing, please use the raise hand function on Zoom, and you'll be assigned a speaking time. If you're listening in via telephone dial-in, press *9 to raise your hand, and then press *6 to unmute yourself. This meeting's being recorded by Local Scene. Thank you so much. We appreciate them. And a record of this meeting will be posted on the Local Scene website as soon as they're able. Anyone intending to make an audio or video recording of this meeting should notify me at this time. Anyone? Great. First order of business is the signing of documents. Will you please brief us, Matt, on what needs to be signed?
Sure, you have a mileage reimbursement for myself, and we have an invoice for an MACC fundamentals course that Juliana took that I signed for, and I also signed a reimbursement for her for travel to a vernal pool workshop.
Okay, thank you.
And we have the orders of conditions for 41 East Avenue that were approved at our last meeting.
Okay, thank you. And I'd like to mention that if you wouldn't mind signing in when you have a second, that would be great, just for the public record. Thanks a lot. Thank you. All right, moving on to action items. I'd like to open a public meeting to discuss the extension request for 20 Marion Drive, 1 Royston Drive. You want to make, is there a representative? You want to come up and make your presentation? Thank you.
Good evening. Thanks for your time. My name is Larry DeMar. I'm here representing Royston Properties for the extension of the order of conditions that's expiring, I think it's May 24th. I've dealt with Matt quite a bit, so he knows I don't really have a presentation, but I'm more or less, I think, did you get Rick Grady's letter?
Yeah, I can take over if you.
All right then, Matt.
You can just kind of hang there for answering
sure.
questions. So Larry filed a request for extension of orders of conditions. Got orders of conditions before I started for a series of commercial buildings off Marion Drive in what's now called Royston Drive. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of back and forth with the commission about whether the property included riverfront area or regular buffer zone, because there are impounded sections of Smelt Brook that go through the property, and ultimately it was decided that it was a pre-developed, pre-disturbed riverfront area. So now he's been going through, he's built 2 of the 5 buildings.
2 out of 5, right.
And last year we had some stormwater issues there. They've done some work to stabilize that, but when we had the request come in, building and planning had some questions about drainage, basically. Like the area of the road that goes through there, it's the same area we had flooding last year with some of those stormwater problems. They had questions about, how is that going to be fixed? What's the engineering fix for making sure that road isn't going to flood going forward? And so this was a good time to revisit that. Rick Grady is the engineer of record on this project. He was not able to be here tonight. He did submit a letter, I think a couple hours ago, basically saying that he feels that once the project is finished, there won't be any issue. I think we'd like to probably question Rick on that. He couldn't be here tonight, but there may be time left to try to figure out whether that's accurate or not. One of the things that's come up in the process, Larry pointed out that his site plan review with the planning board required not only the finished paving on the road, but also a rain garden to be installed. And there's no rain garden on any plans anywhere, including the plan of record from conservation. So if a rain garden is part of the fix for the drainage issue there, then, or regardless, if it's a mandated part of the planning permit, then that's something that would also have to be permitted in front of the Conservation Commission as well. So this is sort of an opportunity to try to make sure that if you're going to extend a permit, that things are going to be good going forward. So it's up to the commission, whatever you have for questions. Like Larry said, his permit, I don't have the exact date either, but he has, I believe, 2 months left on this permit. Once the permit expires, it can't be extended anymore, but there is still time for, if we needed it, several more meetings to figure that out and still be able to issue a permit on time, permit extension. As I explained to Larry, permit extensions are something that the commission doesn't have to do, and they can't be appealed. If the commission decides that a project shouldn't be extended because of various issues, they don't really even need to have their reasoning all that well documented, although we always would, just as a matter of cost. In that situation, he would have to file a new NOI or just stop work completely. So there are a couple issues there. Commission's always welcome to do something like extend the permit pending certain things. You could extend the permit pending, an amendment for the stormwater rain garden, or pending, the engineered fix. But I don't know. I think there's still enough time left here to, have his engineer work on something and be here to speak to it, and then we can try to have a better path going forward. Anybody have specific questions?
Is there anything else that the rep wants to add before we go to commissioners?
Geez, I don't I don't know how much more I can add other than what Rick had presented in his letter. We're when we first had site plan approval, it was always going to be probably at least a 5-year project to begin with. So we knew we were going to have to come back. So it's a little bit of a I guess the question is, excuse me, right? Can you do an amendment, or if we're already required under the site plan approval to do the rain garden, when does that happen? It was a little vague, even though it's required. So, but I think at the end of the day, we're a couple of months out from the expiration. So I want to get ahead of it and make sure everyone's on the same page and happy, and we'll do whatever we need to do.
Okay. Can we hear from the commissioner about this, Commissioner Cottesloe?
Sure. So your specific date is May 17th, 2024. You were asking about what the date is. So
Yeah,
what's the date?
That sounds right.
And again, as far as all this erosion control and sedimentation control goes, there's a lot of language in here about what your responsibilities are.
Is your mic on, Marilyn?
I beg your pardon?
He's asking if your mic is on.
Not used to the mic thing.
No.
So you got the date, and so what I was going to say is, in going over your orders of conditions and all of that, there's a ton of language in here about your responsibilities, keeping up, having it checked, having the agent check what's in place, what isn't in place. right now, there's a problem, and it really needs to be addressed, and it sounds like it needs to be addressed with some engineering. So I think that's a pretty straight-ahead thing that needs to be taken care of.
Sure.
Second to that, there was, under stormwater management, and then passive naturalization of riverfront area. Matt, did you look at that paragraph?
Yeah.
Can you say something about that? Because I
No.
know that, I haven't heard it come up, so I'm curious about the timing of some of these things that have been, your responsibility. And this all started, the orders were issued in February of 2020. You had an extra time because of the state of emergency with COVID. And then an extension, so there's work to be done. So Matt, I'm gonna just pitch it back to you.
Yeah, none of that work has happened, but the area slated for passive naturalization is not terribly disturbed. It isn't really a part of the construction site, other than that's where we had some of the stormwater issues, and where there is still a bit of a stormwater issue there. So it's not uncommon for that type of work to happen last. We wouldn't issue a COC until that happens, but I did highlight some of the stormwater-related conditions to speak to tonight as well, just because we did have those issues last time, but also based on just a quick discussion with Larry and in Rick's letter, it seems like the thought process is that the rain garden would go in that area, which I don't think would fly for a few reasons, one of which being it's supposed to be passive naturalization area, another being that wouldn't pass our bylaw and regulations in terms of stormwater management setbacks, and there's a condition in here that I think was probably put in there. It seems a little bit like the conditions that we get from DEP that says, accepting the work approved hereunder, no additional work or alteration surfaces shall be allowed within the riverfront areas of the site. This restriction may only be varied by the commission for good cause and only upon submission of an NOI or for an amendment to this order of conditions. This condition shall operate as a perpetual restriction. So it doesn't say specifically that the commission couldn't approve a rain garden within the riverfront area, but it hints towards that you probably shouldn't without good reason. So part of what Rick says in the letter is probably true, where looking at the plan, every one of the catch basins in the parking areas and paved areas are connected to infiltration systems, infiltration galleries. So whereas for the last few years, you've had all of the runoff sort of going down slope from the entire site down towards the brook, once you have a lot more of that going into the ground, theoretically, you'll have less runoff coming over there. There is also a runoff issue coming off a neighboring property. We've reached out to the neighboring property to get them to change that so that, they're not potentially causing an issue for his order of conditions on his property. But I don't know, to me, it seems there's still something that's needed there, and this is a good time to try to get that wrapped up. Again, if the commission feels like the problems are few enough that they want to issue the permit and we start to run up against that May deadline, they can extend that permit with an asterisk on it. And they can extend that pending, the engineering or some sort of a review of that modification, the rain garden. The thing about what you mentioned about the planning permit, it's a common thing where Conservation Commission issues a permit and there's always a condition, a standard condition that says that any modification that's needed for another permit of a different board, you have to come back for review. And usually planning would have the same thing when they issue a permit, or ZBA would have the same thing, and it's this kind of tricky circle when you're trying to get all your permits. Anytime there's a change required by one, it's probably needing to be reviewed by the other, and that's the case with the planning board requiring a rain garden means you have to put a rain garden in or you're not, legal under your planning permit, but you can't put a rain garden in without it being on your plan and permitted by conservation too. So that's
Yeah,
how
because that
works.
low point was why it came up.
Yeah.
It just wasn't clear when it had to be done, but I think the intention was you know, when we get to the end and,
Tricky thing is if you wait until the end, it may either limit your engineering options or make them all more disturbing. Like, let's say that the best answer is that you're gonna have to put it in one of the paved areas. Well, you already paved it, it's already done, now you have to go rip it up.
sure.
You know, if you need it for planning, then I would get that permitted with us now. If you try to go back to planning and ask them if they could rewrite that in the way that you didn't need it, you know, it's just right now where there's obviously something of a stormwater issue there, it's probably a good idea to have something like that on the property. It's just a matter of where can it go, where it would be, you know, permittable under our regulations.
Any more comments, questions?
So I think in this case, my recommendation would be to continue. We can have his engineer either, you know, come back at the next meeting or at least provide something on, you know, some sort of a plan that the commission could review before the next meeting. So that way, and essentially it is a little bit combining two things together because they are right now just looking at an extension request. But it's obvious that there's also a need for an amendment request. So it just sort of doesn't make sense for the commission to issue an extension knowing that an amendment is needed in the future, because if we don't get that dealt with now, then towards the end, you're coming back for a COC, and then we're not gonna give it because there's things that are needed, and that's gonna, yeah. So it's probably easier to deal with now.
Right, yeah, I'd rather get out in front of it.
Commissioner?
No, and just to reiterate what Matt's saying, there are some things that need to be taken care of before we can give that. I is how I'm looking at it, very simply.
It might make sense for me to just read off the couple. I'm sure that there's probably a few conditions that you picked out as well. These are for during construction conditions. All construction materials, earth stockpiles, landscaping materials, slurry pits, waste products, refuse, debris, stumps, slash, or excavated materials must be placed or stored outside all resource areas under cover to prevent contact with precipitation and surrounded by erosion and sedimentation controls. During construction, all drainage structures shall be protected from sedimentation, inspected regularly, and cleaned as necessary to avoid impacts to on-site well and resource areas. The areas of construction shall remain in a stable condition at the close of each construction day. Erosion controls should be inspected at this time and repaired, reinforced, or replaced as necessary. This is particularly important if a precipitation event is ongoing or predicted to occur prior to start of work the next day. If sediment is transported from the site on tires of construction equipment or vehicles to the street, sediment shall be swept and removed from the street on a daily basis in order to prevent sediment-laden runoff from entering off-site wetland resource areas. And finally, erosion control devices shall remain in place and properly functioning until all exposed soils have been stabilized with final vegetative cover, and the Conservation Commission and/or agent has authorized their removal. So, again, some of that goes back to issues that we had last year, but that's sort of when they issued that permit. It was with those special conditions that would be done essentially every day. So to the point where we got as bad as it did last year with the condition of the erosion controls, and even today, there were a few things that are a little questionable. It's that stuff, based on the permit, and the way it's written, has to be dealt with every day. Like at any point, if I randomly just happen to swing by the site, it should be like, wow, this erosion control looks great, based on the way that permit is written.
Right, sure.
I did have one question because you didn't read the portion that I highlighted. I had a question in number 28 under erosion and sedimentation control. It says an erosion control monitor shall be designated for the site to oversee the placement, da 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 da. So who's the go-to person? Who's the contact? Because it's pretty definitive about the information and the action that is necessitated.
We do have his name and phone number. I don't have it on the top of my head. The contractor that I met on site last year to fix all the erosion control. What's his name?
The site contractor was Eric Watson. My GC is Clay Rollins.
It was Clay Rollins was who we have on file for that. So.
Okay.
Before we consider a motion, do any members of the public present or the public joining online, any questions, comments? Do we hear a motion? I'm looking for a motion to continue this.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a
Second.
second? All right. So I hear a motion to continue this matter
April 10th?
Sure.
Do you
till
want a vote?
April? All right. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Did somebody make the motion?
Yeah,
made the
Marilyn
motion.
made it, and Dr. Dot seconded.
Okay.
Marilyn?
Aye.
Dr.
Aye.
Dot? Aye. Colleen is an aye. That motion passes unanimously. See you in April.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. The next action item, the conservation agent, Mr. Pinella, would like to discuss with the commission a ZBA filing for 70 Summer Street. Can we hear from you first?
Sure, yeah, and I don't know if we're gonna have anybody here for that tonight. I did catch, this project is represented by Gabriel Padilla of Grady Engineering, and I did see him walking out of town hall the other day and just told him we were gonna be talking about it tonight, but there's no filing in front of us. This is just me feeling like something should go in front of you for a quick discussion. When I went to review the most recent batch of ZBA filings that were piling up on my desk, I found, potential or real wetland violations on almost all of them. So a lot of what we'll be dealing with tonight is in relation to that kind of review. 70 Summer Street, you'll probably all remember, came in front of the commission in 2021 to 2022 as 64 to 70 Summer Street. It was Sean Dormady. And it was an enforcement issue that morphed into an NOI filing and required some mitigation, rain garden, and converting some of the new landscaped areas back to habitat. There was also one of those DEP, recommended or required, actually, special conditions that said that no further mitigation or restoration area could be developed on that property in perpetuity in order to protect the brook. What I didn't realize, even through that whole permitting process, was back in 2019, he had actually filed an RDA in front of the commission to propose taking the building out back from 1 story to 2. And that was from filing a building permit and the conservation agent at the time reviewing it and saying, hey, you need to file an NOI. And so they came to file an RDA instead. And with the addition of erosion control, that was sufficient for them to get a permit from conservation. With the caveat that they weren't doing anything else, they weren't touching anything, they weren't doing anything differently than just bringing it from 1 story to 2. And then ultimately that's not what happened. They did a lot of repaving and fresh paving and landscaped areas and various other activities that did require an NOI and retro. So now there's a ZBA filing to take that building, the property has sold. That part of the property has sold. The part that contains 70 Summer Street was sold to a new owner. They, working with Grady Engineering, filed with ZBA to bring the building from 2 stories to 3 stories. And looking at the layout there, it's the first story is supposed to be commercial, second story is 3 housing units, and they want the third story to be 3 housing units. So just kind of immediately that jumped out at me as it needs something, but I would rather just have the conversation with the commission because I didn't want to just jump right out and say, hey, you need a filing on this, but it appears to me that at a minimum they should at least be filing an RDA the same way that they did in 2019. Obviously this building is about 5 feet away from Stony Brook. So there's significant issues there on the property, so it's a little more questionable when you're talking about expanding use. Now, I would imagine that there's no septic on this property, it's all on sewer, but you're still, looking at whether the process of constructing that extra floor is going to affect any wetland resource areas, or the change in use, the addition of use is going to affect that. You're talking about, now what probably was perceived as a commercial lot by the commission is now looking at having 6 families living there, cars, all that stuff, just extra use there. It's something that at a minimum I think should be in front of the commission for discussion, and a permit, so that if the commission feels there are any guidelines that should be followed in order to make sure there aren't any impacts on the wetland resource areas, they can get that on paper. The other factor there is none of the mitigation has been done yet. So the permit was issued, we did not issue an enforcement order. We issued an enforcement order to compel the filing of an NOI, and then during the NOI process, it was determined that the only way a permit could be issued in retro is through the addition of mitigation and some stormwater work, and none of that has happened yet. There's always the potential in the future to issue an enforcement order on something like that. It's just probably would have been better if we did it that way in the first place. It just doesn't always work that way. So there's a lot going on there. My tendency would be to issue them a letter saying that they need to file an RDA, but
At least.
yeah. Typically, when I do tell people that sort of thing, I never tell somebody that filing an RDA is sufficient. I always tell them, you can file an RDA, and if that's not sufficient, the commission will tell you, and you'll have to file an NOI.
You can begin the process with an RDA.
Yeah. So,
Do you
open
want-
to discussion, I just
Do you want to go on
wanted.
record,
Something.
Commissioner Kaiser?
Anybody else?
I have a comment.
Both of you, yeah.
That building was built as a one-story building.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything about it is strong enough to hold a third floor. That would have to be an engineer question. The thing is that that building was built on filled land, which was a wetland. Again,
Yeah.
will it hold up a third floor? I don't think so. It's sitting on gravel over mud.
So you'd want to hear more about that, Commissioner Kaiser?
So in following up what Dot's saying about the wetland and the structure, I think that is an important point to bring up about
Yep.
the integrity of the building, the foundation, and whether it can support another floor. But again, to Matt's point about increased activity, I think that that's a real concern, given the proximity to the resource areas. At the very least, I think we'd have to talk about roof drains, because we're changing something, and the runoff from that would need to be looked at. Also, they haven't done the rain garden and the mitigation, so I think we need to address that.
I have another question. Is it zoned for that many apartments?
They're going in front of ZBA, so I
Okay.
suggest no, and that's probably what they, it may just be because the structure is close to the brook or close to the edge of the property line. The property line might be the brook there, but
I believe it is.
I'm not positive if they needed to file with ZBA because of the layout or because of the number of units. But, yeah.
Again,
But again, I think the commission didn't realize when they were reviewing it in the first place, either through the RDA or the NOI, and I don't have this for sure, I can confirm this, but I don't think the commission ever really discussed residential use there, which could come with its own suite of conditions. Just thinking off the top of my head of just people changing oil in the parking lot, or, that sort of thing, and,
Well, there's already very little parking down there.
yeah.
Parking lot's essentially full. Well, there isn't room for a lot more cars.
Not the new one out back.
Not that one, but again, it is not gonna hold that many cars.
All right, well, that I guess is all I just wanted before I reached out on that, to get a feeling for whether I'm right in thinking that that is needed, and get your feeling on the work that hadn't been done. And again, it's a little bit of a tricky thing, because technically they have 3 years to get the work done, but when it originated in an enforcement situation, I'm not sure the commission would be terribly apt to allow additional modifications on the property without the mitigation work being done, because as it was in 2021, it was a filing in retro. They had already done all of the work, so.
Right. They, would you take up the fact that they paved over essentially open ground near the river itself, almost to the edge of the river? We talked to them about that,
Yeah.
but didn't recommend that they take it up.
Right.
That might be something to rethink.
Good.
Something
Somebody
more?
just put a sign down there too, the beauty parlor that just opened,
Yeah,
they just put a brand new sign out front, right in the ground.
Didn't see.
yep, they do.
I'm sorry, Megan, I couldn't hear you.
There's a new beauty parlor down there too, and they just put a brand new sign right out front, right next to the river.
Looking at some of the documentation Matt provided, this actually goes back 40 years of trying to protect this wetland area, and it goes back to the culvert and another structure. And are we going to address that?
Yeah, there was a reason I tucked that into the folder there.
Yeah.
That was a special condition that
That
was
was supposed to
put
be removed,
on
right?
the orders of conditions, was that the property owner would allow the town to access that point to remove the culvert. There was an enforcement order from 1984 for a family member of somebody who might be sitting at this table to remove that culvert.
Which culvert are you talking about?
The one to, if you're looking at the building to the left, in Stony Brook.
I can't picture a culvert down there.
I'm sorry, I said to the left, it's out back. It's in between the two buildings. It's in between like where the tattoo parlor is and the building that was just raised up. There's a culvert there that allows foot traffic or back
Oh, you're
years
talking
ago,
about the
maybe
big
tractor
pipes?
traffic, yeah.
Yeah, those were supposed to have been removed back then.
Exactly.
And, you know.
So there was a special condition in there to make sure that essentially they wouldn't block the town from removing it if the town
Yeah.
decided they could go in and do that.
I-
But
in
it
looking-
is something that we should bring up in any future filing because we have
Yeah.
a new owner now, and just to make sure they understand that.
In looking at that, you and I looked at it together. For people who don't know, my father built that building, and he put the pipes in the river. I am reasonably certain that the pipes that my father put in the river are gone, and the one that is there now is different.
Yes.
And it's moved further towards the street side. I don't know who would have done that. The land sold
Yeah.
a long time ago. And I wasn't looking at it. I wasn't even in the state anymore at that point.
Right. So yeah, I think that's something that we would bring up during any filing, just to make sure they have an understanding there. And yeah, we can talk more about that when we get a filing.
Before we talk about the filing exactly, is there anyone in the public present who wants to weigh in on this matter? Anyone present online? So are we ready to talk about what needs to be filed, what you'd like to see filed in this?
I think I'll, based on the sounds of it, just reach out and tell them they have to file, that they're welcome to file an RDA if they think that's sufficient. They should understand it could potentially need an NOI as well, and that the commission's going to be looking to discuss the unfinished mitigation work.
Does that mean a hold on activity until they do that?
Can't really do anything anyways. I mean, they could start the mitigation work because they have a permit to do that, but I'd basically be letting them know that, you know, ZBA is not the final step for adding a story on, that they are going to need to file that with conservation.
We don't need a motion in that regard then?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Going to move on to enforcement?
Sure.
First item, 56 Main Street.
Yeah, I can, I know the owners of the property are here. I can give a quick,
Feel free to come up to the podium. When you come on up to the podium, please identify yourselves for the record. If you step away from the podium, you'll need to carry a microphone with you. Let us know and we'll get you a handheld mic.
No
Thank
problem.
you.
Adam Harrington, co-owner of 56 Main Street.
Okay,
Jacob Barnes, co-owner of 56 Main Street.
all right, thank you. Matt?
so this is another ZBA thing. These guys are the owners of 56 Main Street. They were looking to lease the property to someone. I've, you know, been in meetings with the building inspector, planner, and you know, their potential renter. And when I finally got around to looking at the ZBA filing, I noticed that there are wetlands behind the property, For reference, this is directly next to 38 Crescent Street. So 38 Crescent Street has an ORAD issued by the commission that they recently came to get extended, and the commission extended, so I was a little familiar with that property. I thought the only wetlands were behind 38. When I reviewed the ZBA filing, there were wetlands behind 56 Main Street, and when I reviewed the 38 Crescent Street plan of record, just to see if that sort of lined up with it, the 38 Crescent plan sort of indicated that there were more wetlands behind 56 Main Street than show up on the plan in front of ZBA. So what I did then was just started looking through historical imagery. So I thought this was going to be an easy one. I thought the parking area had been installed for a long time, and the review of aerial imagery showed that to not be the case. So if I can share my screen, I can run you through what this looks like. So, and then I reached out to ZBA because it was just a few days up to that meeting, and I let them know that there was a potential wetlands issue there. At a minimum, it was going to need a filing in retro, and at worst, it was filled wetlands. All right, so most of this imagery came from Google Earth. Some of it, I think, came from our town GIS. But you have October 2016, so here is the one building right out front here. Then in April 2017, you have a foundation for a secondary building and a little bit of clearing behind it. June 2019, 2 years later, you can see that second building has been built, but you have trees pretty much coming right up to the edge of that. There's only a limited space there. Just for memory, you bought the property, was it 2018?
We bought it in 2018, built it for the end of the year.
So just for the record, they bought the property in 2018, so in between those two images. So they were, I think, responsible for getting the permit for actually building the second house there. Not from conservation, but from building. We don't have any permits on record for this address. Then October 2020, you can see it's a little shady, but what looks like some clearing right there. And then when you go to March 2021, again, you can see that it looks like that area goes a lot further back. You got some shading here from trees, so it's a little bit harder to tell what you're looking at. And then when you look at the July 2023 imagery, it's pretty clear at that point. So there's that second building right there, and the trees have been cleared all the way back to there. Now, on their plan from ZBA, it shows wetlands, I think, being roughly around this space right here. So I didn't do any real accurate calculations, but it was pretty obvious. We were well within the 100 feet of the parking area. Couldn't be sure about the building, that second building, but the parking area itself looked like unpermitted expansion. And then just for reference, this is the little excerpt from the ANRAD plan, or the ORAD plan actually, from 38 Crescent Street. So 38 Crescent Street is right here. You can all see the cursor, right? Mm-hmm. And then 56 Main Street is right here. So, and as a reminder, when we do all this type of work, typically they don't go on adjacent properties to delineate wetlands without permission. So when they can't do that, they estimate. So right here you can see C6, C7, and C8, and then the 50-foot buffer off of those. So this is actually on the 38 Crescent property, but indicates there is a wetland right here. This roughly lines up with what they have on their ZBA filing. And then over here you have approximate 50-foot wetland buffer. So this right here indicates that whoever did the wetlands work on here, which I believe was ECR, Brad Holmes, saw wetlands there, couldn't flag them, that sort of thing. But so I can't confirm that. I'm not saying there were definitely wetlands there, but if you look at where the existing house is on 38 right here, you're talking probably 2.5 of those lengths back. And you can also look at some of the contour lines there on the property, right? And then when you look over here, you have that right there, another one, and then another half. So where he was seeing wetlands was essentially right where these cars are parked now. So again, I can't confirm that. All I know is that based on aerial imagery, there was a parking lot put in, and potentially even the structure, you know, may have been within jurisdiction. I know they got a permit from building for that, but there's definitely unpermitted work there. It might just be the parking area. If it was simply unpermitted based on wetlands 50-plus feet away, that may not be that problematic. It may just be a filing in retro. If they filled a wetland to put that parking lot in, then that's kind of a different story. So that's why I sent them a letter, told them they should come to this meeting tonight so that we can talk about it. They can be clear about what happened. You can all be clear, or anybody can ask questions so that everybody walks out of here with an understanding of what the next steps are.
Great. Do we have any comments from the commission? Commissioner Cartersor, do you have anything?
Well, I'm just curious if you had a response to that whole.
Do you want to respond before we start
I'm dying to hear
landing
that.
down on you?
I was gonna say, so it's all pretty accurate. I think one of the pictures in the slide was a little misleading. So if you go, that one, it's that one right there. So if you go up to the one before that, so if you can see, do I need a?
Can we have the wireless mic out here, please?
They yell at us if you don't.
We always need the wireless mic.
We always do.
Yeah, he'll bring it in to
We
you.
use it every week. He'll be on in a second.
Don't worry, he'll bring it in.
So here, in the previous picture, it looked like there was a lot of trees here. I don't know if it was the angle of the satellite picture, but, so, yeah. So this was all, when we bought this was all clear, we were using it for parking. So what happened was when we got the permit for this, we had already gone through planning and zoning. Thanks. We had already gone through planning and zoning to build that building in the back. The issue was the amount of parking spots, and when they gave us the permit, they're like, yeah, you have plenty of parking in the back. We needed X amount of parking for X amount of square feet. Like, yeah, you got it. And that was the reason why we bought the building in the first place. It was contingent upon our P&S that we could build this building in the back. So we had already gone through this process. You know, it was in front of conservation in 2018, and that's basically why we bought the building, to use it for what it's used as now.
Sorry, can I
Yes,
interrupt for a
please,
second?
Greg.
When you say it was in front of conservation in 2018?
I mean, it went through your desk. I mean, to get the building permit, it goes across you guys' desk. So it was reviewed by someone in conservation when we pulled the permit. Twice, once in 2016 and once in 18.
So you mean once for the foundation and then once
Correct.
for the construction of the building?
Correct.
Hello, if I could. Again, Adam Harrington. I do have one picture, so first off, I did send out to ZBA and Debbie, I don't have, but
Yep.
These are the actual permits for the building and everything for our side of it. And I found one picture that we have that I can share with, actually two pictures that I can share, but this was the original picture of the building. I don't know how to do this to go on towards you.
Pass it down there.
But as you can see on the left-hand side of the property, the existing foundation or retaining wall came around to make a driveway to go that way. And as you can see here, when we just then started, we parked our trailer in that exact location as well to make that work, you know, for us to go around. So I just wanted to share these with you. I apologize.
And this is the second building in both of these pictures?
That's the front building. That's the same building.
So both of these pictures are the...
Yeah, that was when we originally bought it, and then...
Unfortunately, we don't have pictures of the actual, we didn't take pictures of the parking lot we were building it. We didn't think there was any need to.
Yeah, and I thought...
And to your point earlier, I still have not checked the building permits on file to see if one of my predecessors signed off on a building permit for the structure. So that part is still very much up in the air. As far as the parking lot, I can't.
That was emailed, I think, to you guys, or to, do you have the copy of the building permit, right?
Yes, I just gave it.
Yeah, just the one page of it, but there'll be a bunch of papers there, and typically when they send them around for review,
Yeah,
the conservation agent will sign off on
Yeah.
it. So it's possible that a conservation agent signed off on the building, which would be fine.
and our purpose solely here is we're not building more, we're not creating more, we're not changing the property. Just we have a new tenant that's coming in that is of a different use. He's in automotive world. We realize that the bylaws pull out automotive a little bit differently than, say, office space or anything like that. So he's gone through the process.
It's not necessarily automotive either, he sells golf carts, so it's not like they're not gonna put an auto shop or car sales place in there. He does golf carts and
So
electric, like scooters.
all we're trying to do is get him a tenant space to continue on with the same way we've done for 6 years. Just, in essence, no difference from.
And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the property, or something that have been in town for years. That back lot used to be paved. It used to be like a hotel. So they had like little cabins in the back there. So that whole area back behind where there's actually a foundation of one of the old cabins, like here. And, so that was all paved, and so I would say it's improved because that was impervious surface, and now it's not.
How far
So-
back were the cabins there?
Geez, I think the previous owner bought the front building and had turned it into cafe in the early 90s, but I think the cabins were there back from like the 50s into like the late 70s, 80s.
I lived
I
in
mean, I grew up down in
Kingston.
Rocky Nook, and I can
Yeah.
remember them being there when I was a kid.
I don't remember cabin.
It did come up in the ZBA hearing too.
Really?
One of the ZBA members said, when there are cabins back, it's,
Yeah.
I think, pretty well known that there were little motel units
Yeah.
back there or something. It's just what I sort of told them when they brought that up is that doesn't mean there weren't wetlands there.
Right.
So that's, I think, what this board should look at is just, where are the wetlands? Is there a filing needed? Is there restoration needed? If no, then they get to go forward with
Have
their
you been
plans.
Have you looked at that yet?
Nope, I haven't been on the property.
Okay.
I've been on 38 Crescent, but that was, at this point, I think a year ago, and I have not been at this property. So
Right.
if the commission wanted to do a site visit, they could do a site visit.
We should do that.
If the commission wants, again, I don't want to delay their
Yeah.
timeline too much on this. My tendency in a situation like this would be to ask them to get a wetlands person out there poking hole. The driveway is gravel.
Correct, yeah.
Poke holes in that driveway with me present to just make sure they're not stopping at the fill and
Yeah.
see if there's wetland soils there. If there are no wetland soils there, then all we're probably looking at is a RDA in retro for, for permitting the parking lot within Concom jurisdiction. But
Okay.
if they poke around there and they find that there are wetlands underneath the parking lot, then I think you're looking at a different story. But if you want to do a site visit first, we could do that. But again, I don't want to delay their timeline. It may be quicker for them just to call up a wetlands person and get them on the ground as soon as they can, and then come back on April 10th. So it's up to what the commission thinks.
And to be completely honest, so last winter, where we had a couple of dead trees come down in the parking lot. So we did have a tree company come in and take a couple of trees down in the back that were outside of where you can see where the existing parking lot is. We did take a couple of trees down in there. I just want to make you aware of that. And we didn't know there was wetlands back there when we initially talked to Jason about, because initially we were going to build another building back there, and we spoke to Jason Silva, and he had the wetlands delineation that he had on our plot plan was way in the back. Like, I'm gonna try to pull up, for some reason, when I do this, it doesn't let me move out of this. Let's see.
I just tried the GIS, it's not helping.
It might be.
Is it not helping?
Yeah.
It might be on this one here.
No, it doesn't really show.
So,
probably be.
so from what Jason showed us, I don't know if this is it, but he said the wetlands that he knew about were back here. So we didn't think that we were dealing with conservation at all. So he's like, yeah, you're far away from wetlands. So that's the only reason why we did that. If we need to replicate that or restore it, we have absolutely no problem doing that. I just wanted to make you guys aware of that.
Okay, so just for reference, this is the plan that came with the ZBA filing. So you have the existing building, we have the second building, then you have parking behind it, and then approximate BBW here.
Yeah.
And again, from what Jay was just saying, this down here is the noted area to us of when Jay Barnes talked with Jay Silver.
So yeah, I think it was 1 inch to 30 feet. I think I measured it off, and it was something like 40 feet to the edge of the parking area. So again, if all we're talking about is putting in a gravel parking area or moving some trees within distance of wetlands, that's a different story. So I think the biggest question here is, was there another wetland here that was filled at one time or another? I'm not saying that you guys did it, because if that whole area was already there, they may have already done that. It may have just been tree canopy overhanging. Obviously, there were clearly trees cut within the last couple of years, but the wetland could have been filled a lot longer ago.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, that the trees that were cut are in any of those satellite pictures. We just did that last winter, was it 2 months ago, the big snowstorm, big windstorm we had. We had a couple of trees come down. So we just wanted to make sure they weren't falling on anyone's vehicles or on trailers.
So you want an expert to come in, report,
that would be my recommendation.
put this in on April?
That would be my recommendation, is to wetlands person, go through, because again, this isn't confirmation. Now, see the C6, C7, C8, I think, I haven't done like an overlay of the two plans over each other, but this could be in roughly the area of the wetlands that are on their plan, which again are approximate as well. But this right here, approximate 50-foot wetland buffer, does not mean that there is definitely a wetland there, but it indicates that there probably was, or certainly could have been.
And your point is by augering down and seeing the layers of the soil, identifying.
Yeah, we've had some similar situations before where there wasn't a wetland on the plan, but on the ground it looked like it, and then when we went back with the wetland scientist for review, went down 2 auger depths, you had black muck, whereas the first auger depth was fill, but when they did their initial work, they didn't think to go any further than the fill. So I think wetlands person with me there to observe the digging so that we don't get a report that says, hey, it's great, all that was there was fill, and they didn't actually dig past it, I think would suffice. And at that point, then we can come back and just talk about steps to go forward, because at that point, either you're looking at restoration or you're looking at a filing in retro.
So just want to continue this till April, give you a chance to get out there?
Yeah,
Sound good?
and
What does the commission think
just
about
because,
that?
again, we haven't been through this,
Yeah.
how does this work with relation to our tenant getting occupancy of, or his special permit to do his business with it? Bottom line, he has, in the front building, he has office space, and in the back building, he's going to be restoring the golf carts, et cetera.
Mhm.
April 1st is kind of his date to take the back building. How does that work? Just for his, just so we can explain it to him as well.
I mean, it's up to the commission, really, because, either way, you have the ability to take legal action to require whatever work needs to be done. It's certainly easier when, people file and need something, because that's the real driver for making sure things get done and they get done quickly. You know, there are other situations where these things drag out for a long time and we're constantly having to get with council and send letters and demand. It'll, I imagine, get messy if the result is that there was a filled wetland there and then you're requiring them to restore a wetland instead of having a parking lot, because your tenant is not likely to appreciate that situation, right? So that could get a little messy, I think, if you do lease that and then all of a sudden you're saying, but you don't have any parking back there anymore, right?
Yeah, correct.
To some degree, yes. I mean, again, we're trying to solve everybody from ZBA to planning
Right.
and yourselves. So parking is of concern for others, but it doesn't seem to be so much for this board. And what we're just trying to do is solve that problem and see how we navigate this all together. It's new to us.
When is
I
your
don't think
ZBA
we're
here?
certainly not putting any further strain on the environment that's been for the last 40, 50 years. It's been like that. I mean, we'll do, you know, whatever your recommendation is, but we're just looking for something like that we can move forward contingent upon us doing X, Y, and Z.
When is your ZBA continuance?
We don't have one. There's approval.
It was an approval.
Oh, so, all right, so they
Yeah.
approved it just pending, or is there any, did they put a contingency or anything?
No, we're here just to kind of talk to you guys and feel everything out.
There was I believe it was, speaking with Jason yesterday, I believe it was 4-0 on the ZBA.
I mean,
In favor.
if the ZBA approved, I mean, conservation doesn't really tell people what they can and can't do in terms of leasing their property or modifying use outside of situations where what they're looking to modify would affect conservation resources. In this case, there's I would say, an existing condition that is concerning to the commission that needs either filing or restoration. If you were looking to put a parking lot in right now to get your tenant in, I would say the commission would say absolutely not. But again, I think depending on what their timeline was like, you may want to at least know how this wetlands, you know, having him come and poke holes in the ground doesn't take terribly long, assuming that you can get them there quick enough.
Mm-hmm. And
That
I know,
will
I know
probably
Brad, we know a
inform
couple,
pretty well, you
yeah.
know, what your next move should be, I think. But again, I don't think the commission really has any authority to tell you, no, don't have your tenant move in, as long as ZBA gave you your permit and you don't need permitting from anybody else in order to make that happen. If you needed something like occupancy from the building department, then they may be checking with us on that and saying, like, should we give them occupancy?
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then-
we're the only reason why we're here is just a slight change in use. It went from retail to automotive, semi-automotive, I guess.
I would say, get with a wetlands person, talk to me, let's schedule something.
Okay.
If you need suggestions, I do have a list of local
Yeah.
wetland
We do have a
scientists.
couple.
Yeah.
We appreciate that.
Perfect. Then just, I would say, see what their timeline is like and then talk to my office so that we can make sure that we're on site.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Help you move forward as quickly as possible in whatever direction it's going.
Okay.
Cool.
Do we need to put them on next month's agenda, or just wait and see what happens?
I would say it's probably a good idea to put it on the April 10th agenda, just because whatever's going to come out of this, there'll be something. So
Okay.
if they need to file an RDA, they may not have the time to get, you know, the public notice in for April 10th, but let's have it tentatively be here for discussion on April 10th, so I can at least give the commission an update on what came out of that. If they don't schedule the site work, the inspection until after the 10th, then we'll just push it back to the next.
Okay.
Does that work?
Come on back in April.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, the tenant is, as long as he gets his special permit from the building inspector, where he's okay to occupy the building as is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like I said, just that, you know, that I think the real question is what's under the parking area. And if there's wetlands under the parking area, then that,
Different discussion.
yeah.
Okay, I just,
That will- that
again,
will lead to
I gotta
more
give something to him
conversation.
when we get him out of here, so
Sure.
that's why I was just asking, so
Right.
we're all on the same page.
Okay.
See you then.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you so much for your courtesy. Under enforcement as well, we're moving to 556 Elm Street. Thank you. Would you please identify yourself for the record?
Hi, my name is Sue Carlson. I'm the property owner of 556 Elm Street in Kingston, Mass.
Okay. Hi, Sue. I'm
Hi.
Matt. We never got to officially meet. So similarly, this was a ZBA filing review. This
Well,
was,
can you kind of explain to me, because I got a little confused about, and I guess Jason Silva is the connection. So I'm a widow with 2 kiddos and moved up here in 2022 and bought the property November, I think 14th of 2022 is the closing date. They moved it on me 2 or 3 times. And I had my attorney go through and look at everything, and I didn't see anything on the deed or the description of the land survey, you know, that said wetlands or area. Now, I came from another state, and so whenever there's, you know, 100-year floodplain or wetlands or zone or anything, usually that shows up on the survey of the property. But in my closing documents, I don't see any record of that. Even on the appraisal, when they compared, now they did, you know, of course, outline Indian Pond, but the pictures that they had taken, I guess, were in the summer, and even though it's a 65 or 60 acre, 66 acre pond, the little cove that I'm on seems like it's a, what do you call it, fair weather wetland, or, you know, basically if we have a long dry summer, it will dry up and it just turns into grassy area. And so the pictures that the real estate agent, South Shore Sotheby's Realty in Duxbury, had sent me said, well, you're on the pond, and she actually used it as a selling point, but she said, well, this summer we're kind of dry. So the area that I'm on was, you know, all the way down, and it was just duckweeds or whatever the vegetation is on the bottom of the pond. So I was kind of taken aback when I got your email and said, you know, I'm in a wetlands violation. So I didn't quite understand how that connection came through.
Give you a little breakdown on that. Just speaking sort of high level, non-legal, it's pretty common for wetlands to not be disclosed as part of a property purchase, at least I think in Massachusetts.
Wow.
Everything as far as the wetlands laws are written are always on the property owner. If you purchase property and there are wetlands or there are violations of wetland regulations, that's on the purchaser. It's like a buyer beware situation. There's a lot of legal precedent of conservation commissions making somebody fix filling of a wetland or some sort of unpermitted work, and them fighting it all the way up to court and having the court say it's due diligence. And even if it's something that didn't show up anywhere on paper, it's just always comes to the buyer in that situation. In your situation, I don't know what is there for wetlands other than Indian Pond, but that does count as a wetland. And they very often have wetlands associated with the shoreline that are either very narrow or, depending on topography, will expand out a little bit. But just, again, the way we got here was review of ZBA filings. This filing was simply because of a zoning thing that limits the number of dogs you're allowed to have. If you have one more dog than the regulations allow, so had to file with ZBA for some sort of a, you know, permit to be able to have that 5th dog, and that brings the ZBA filing in front of all the other departments for review. So they sit on my desk until I review them. most of the time I look at them and go like, yep, no wetlands, and move along. For some reason during this batch, they all were near wetlands, and they were all various things that needed review. And again, I think I tried to indicate in my email to you that this wasn't like a huge, like, punitive thing. It's not like.
Well, I hope so.
Right.
I mean, like 27-page document that I got was a little, concerning. And then I tried to go through, and get a guesstimate of the fees of, there is a dock built on the back entry of the property. I think there's 300 feet pond frontage, I guess, that I would have access to. And it's funny too, because that was another selling point that, the previous owners used, is like, oh, well, we have a dock,
Right.
And so once I received this, I reached back out to, it's Robert and Margaret Carmody that were the previous owners. I think they bought the raw land in 1999 and then built a house there. Originally, it was a 10-acre plot, and then they sold a piece of it off to someone else on the Plimpton side, because it's right on the Plimpton-Kingston town line. And then what I'm left with is, I think, roughly 3.18 acres plus the home site down to Indian Pond. But yeah, even the real estate agent used it as, oh, you've got a dock. No one else in the cove has one. Well, okay, maybe this is why no one else on the dock on the cove has one. Because there's like a $1,450 application fee and then $4 a linear foot. And I've reached out to the Carmodys, and they are an elderly couple, but they said that they don't recall anything from 2012 or 2013 about it. And I've also reached out to the real estate agent to see if I can find any records, plans, or idea of who built it, if they outsourced it or, hired someone else to come in and do it. I know they had a tree business, so if this was outside their area of expertise, who did they bring in to actually get it done?
Well, let me just go through the rest of this. And again, I think I tried, at least in the email, to just not scare you with this, because I understand you just bought the property and you didn't do anything there. So I think I said in the email, like, the most likely thing here is either you file in retro for the dock, or the dock gets removed.
Okay.
But let me just I'll pull this up just so that the commission can review. Of course, when I do that, then I can't get on the Zoom. Okay. So, and again, you bought the property in 2022.
Correct, November of 2022.
1990s, nothing. That's Indian Pond that we're looking at, and a portion of Sue's property to the left. 2001, house is built. 2008, again, they had some sort of a tree business there, and stuff starts to pile up back there. 2011 to 2012, now you start to see something back here on the shoreline. 2013, 2014, definitely a dock there now. And you do have a lot of stuff over there. 2013, 14, dock's still there. Now we're in 2024. Again, new owner, dock is still there. And a lot of this has been cleaned up, which is great.
Yeah,
So,
I asked for that to be removed before I bought the property.
Yeah. So, a couple things here. The docks are permitted through the Conservation Commission. They're also permitted through DEP's Chapter 91 program. I did check with Chapter 91 to see if maybe they had record of it that I didn't have, and they didn't have record of it either, which is usually an indicator that it wasn't permitted. Again,
So
sometimes we lose
even
our
if they
records too.
hired someone, an outside source, what'd you call it,
They would have it,
DEP?
yeah,
They
yes.
should have a record of it?
Yeah, I mean, typically we would have a record of it too, but that's not always the case. Sometimes records get lost or whatnot. It's not typical that we just have no record of any filing for a property, but I didn't have anything on the property, so that prompted me to reach out to DEP. They said they didn't have it, so basically, if having a dock there is something that you want, then I would say you want to go through the permitting process to get your dock in retro. Most people, I would say, in that situation hire a wetlands professional or an engineering firm to do the permitting, because it's a little more extensive, I think, than your usual putting a shed in or something like that. The other option, if it's just not worth the hassle for you, and like you said, the cove in a lot of years might be, it is a very shallow pond,
Yeah.
and you don't want it, then you could remove the dock and we could just, you know, kind of confirm how that work is done so that it's not done in a more damaging way. Like somebody's not going to go in there with a machine and rip the thing out and dig stuff up.
Yeah.
That would be one way to deal with it. But it also just, we used to send out new homeowner letters, and we keep talking about getting back to that, and we haven't got there yet, but it's helpful just in looking at that to see that, you know, essentially the edge of the pond, because I don't know that there's any real extensive wetlands attached to it around here. It doesn't look that way anyways on aerial imagery. 100 feet landward of that is Conservation Commission jurisdiction. So
From the
any work
edge of
that's
the pond
performed
up?
from the edge of the pond or any associated wetlands would be conservation jurisdiction, which means any activity within that area that has potential to harm the wetland needs to be filed with the commission.
Okay.
It's really easy in a lot of cases to check with my office to say like, hey, I want to put this here. Do you think I need to file for that? In some cases, I'll say you need to get a wetlands person there to delineate wetlands. In a case like this, I suspect it's going to be very easy, and we would be able to help you determine whether you had to file a full NOI, an RDA, or just an admin review where just staff in my office approve a permit for minor activities. So it's just a good thing to have on hand. The other thing that I wrote down just for the ZBA filing was that 4 or 5 dogs on a property on wetlands, particularly this pond, would be concerning if somebody wasn't carefully managing waste. So it's just an opportunity to say like, hey, please, you know, dispose of it, instead of a lot of people just kind of pile it up somewhere. All that stuff tends to run off with the rain and bring all sorts of contaminants and nitrogen and all that stuff into a pond like this and cause algae blooms and different things like that. So that's what I got. Any questions?
So can you give me an idea, like when you say a retroactive permit, am I going all the way back to 2013 or 14?
Yeah, I mean, the year doesn't really matter. It just means that the construction's already done.
It's already there.
Oh, okay.
So it's just a filing in retro. Basically, you'd be going to, you know, an engineer and saying, or a wetlands person and saying, hey, I need to file an NOI for installation of a dock, and I'm going to need a Chapter 91 permit. You know, can you help me get that filing done? What's it going to cost me?
Mm-hmm.
That will give you an idea, I guess, of whether it's a worthwhile expense for you, whether you think you get that much use out of the dock or anything like that.
Right.
Because again, it's you know, this isn't punitive, especially in a situation where you didn't install the dock. It's not like anyone's looking for penalties. It's just the dock can either be gone or be permitted, and then everything will be in alignment with the regulations, and you'll never have to talk to us again unless you want to do work within 100 feet of the wetlands.
Can you give me an idea of like, what would it cost to do the NOI filing, the Chapter 91 permit? I mean, it looked like it could be upwards of $2,000. But I imagine it's going to be $2,000 to $3,000 to have someone come in and appropriately dispose of it, I guess you would say.
Yeah, hard to say. I haven't obviously seen it. Some of them are more
And
easily
that
removed.
looks really big compared to what's left of it. So I just wonder if over the last 12 years, if maybe, because they didn't seal the wood, so,
Yeah.
you know, wood exposed to water constantly causes rot. So I just wonder if they got rid of the extended part out, because it's probably, it's not 10 foot long, what's left of it.
Okay.
I can measure, but
I mean,
it's
we
not-
can meet you on site too if you want that. We can take a look at it and just give you an idea, at least in terms of what you're looking at for removing it. I think you're probably in the right ballpark in terms of an NOI filing. I mean, it's substantial. That's why anytime anybody can get away with not filing an NOI, they try not to. They try to file an RDA first and see if they can get through that, because there's less fees and there's less requirements. The NOI filing requires a lot of specific things, and the same thing with Chapter 91. They want it to see everything. They even want the plans to be in a certain format. So I think that's why most people, when they're doing docs, do use a engineering firm or some representative that's more familiar with
The
with those
process and how to
processes.
do it.
But if you need some names, like I said, I have, we don't recommend anybody, but we have a list of the, different wetland firms and engineering firms that we typically see filing in front of us, just so we can give people a list to get them started, with contacting people.
Okay.
So,
And what type of timeline would you want to see? I imagine those things don't happen overnight.
right.
Do you need to take a look at it regarding condition, or are you going to just let Sue run with it, or?
That's up to you guys, in terms of timing or what you want to do.
Yeah.
I mean, if she thinks there's value in us coming out and taking a look at it and saying like, hey, this thing's junk, you could probably pay a couple of high school kids to pull this stuff out of the water and be done with it. And that way, in the future, if you really want the dock, you can go through the process of having it engineered and designed and permitted. If what's there is substantial enough to be used and it's worth filing in retro if you want it, then, we could probably make that determination in the field. Yeah.
Well, do you want to put this on for next month? We can go out in the meanwhile. What do you think?
I'm open to,
What do you think?
I can't hear you when you.
That's because I'm muttering. Do you want to put this on for next month and go out in the meantime?
I don't
See
think we
what
need
Sue
to
wants to
look
do
at
with it?
Seems pretty straightforward. Like you said, file or pull it up,
But if she wants to pull it up, she may not.
if she wants to, yeah.
what do you want to do for a timeline?
It's up to,
Doesn't have to be, it's been there for 10 years, so it's not
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we don't have an imminent issue where there's a large amount of pollution happening, so.
right.
What kind of time do you need, Sue, to,
Well,
think this through.
I don't know, I would love to see, a list, just to get an idea, from whatever engineering groups that you guys recommend or something, and I'd have to schedule appointments with them, I'm sure, for someone to come out, take a look at it, or, look at measurements or photos that I could provide, and, I think I heard you say April 10th was the next hearing date.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty aggressive. I don't think I could have someone out, view it, give me an estimate, considering, Good Friday this week, Easter weekend.
What about
And
May?
then-
sure.
1st or 2nd? May 22nd. We'll continue this to May 22nd. Don't have to come in person if you don't want. If you,
Okay.
Zoom is fine. In the meantime, be in touch with our office. We'll try to help you, guide you through it.
Okay, awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for not saying, you owe us $27,000 that somebody else built in 2012.
It's never fun to be surprised.
And welcome to Kingston.
Hey, we're gonna charge you $1,000 to register your dogs.
Yeah.
Welcome to Kingston.
All right, we're going to move on to meeting minutes. This is the February 28th, 2024 minutes, right? I don't have a copy in front of me.
Was anybody absent for the? Oh,
Yeah, I'm not.
You weren't in yet. Yeah.
If she can't vote, we don't have a quorum.
So why don't we push them forward to
Does that
next
matter?
meeting?
Yeah, let's skip it to the next meeting.
All right, that's super. You want to update us, Matt, on the Keolis MBTA right-of-way update?
Yes. We received a notification from Keolis, who is the contractor who handles all of MBTA's right-of-way maintenance for vegetative maintenance activities that they'll be performing this year. Typically, we put that on file and we put that on the agenda so that we tell you it's there, so that you or anybody in the public can reach out and ask for it if they want. Yeah, and I believe it was already in the OneDrive.
Okay. You want to move on to 10 Bonnie Lane?
Sure.
All right, what's up?
I won't bother pulling up pictures unless anybody needs to see anything, but we received an administrative review request for removal of 3 mature pine trees at 10 Bonnie Lane. Went out and took a look. Trees were definitely within striking distance of the house, were definitely a hazard. Took a quick look to make sure they weren't in a resource area, and the topography was pretty obvious. They were not. They're on the close side, but the closest one was still, not terribly close to the resource area. So it fit all of the check boxes of the admin review. I issued an administrative review permit so that they could remove those trees. I required that one of them, the one closest to the wetlands, be left with, I believe, 20 feet of bowl, and it was multi-trunked for wildlife habitat. I also asked them to remove the English ivy that was growing up the trees and around a couple trees nearby, because everybody should be removing all of their English ivy that's growing up trees or other vertical objects in or near their property, because that's one of the new invasives, and when it grows up, it matures and produces seeds, and then they grow up all the other trees.
Up Stonewall.
They also kill the trees by changing the bark microclimate, increasing wind sail effect, causing trees to get knocked over, and they do eventually penetrate the bark with their roots and take all of the tree's fluids away.
Those bad ivies. Does that include all, like on stone walls, or?
Specifically English ivy, heterohelix. It's the one that looks like, I can pull up the picture now that we're talking about it.
If it looks like poison ivy, I'm no help.
Does not look like poison ivy.
Everything looks like poison ivy to me.
No.
Yes, better be safe
If
in
it's green, I'm like,
my
nope.
book. Yeah.
Okay. Sharing for all the people watching at home. This is the immature leaf of heterohelix English ivy.
Mhm.
This is the typical ground cover plant. It's been in this country for about 150 years. It's one of those ones that in your garden, it will create a nice dense ground cover, and in your garden and on the ground, it's not really problematic, but once it grows up, when it gets a little higher than this one here, it would convert to its adult form where the leaf has a different shape, and it will start to produce seed. It will get a lot denser. That's when you're driving around town, you see the pine trees completely covered from bottom to top with vegetation. It's this. So it's bad stuff. But there are other vines that are fine. There are native things like Virginia creeper that has the 5 leaflets. That's really good for a lot of different wildlife. Native grapes, while they can be a little problematic near your house, are great for wildlife. They're native. This is from Europe and is not good. So, little side note. But I issued an admin review permit. So.
But if it's just growing up over stone walls and things like that, is that also problematic?
No, if it's in your yard and it's on the ground, there's no real concern. If it was in the woods and it's crawling around the ground, I would pull it so that it didn't start to climb up.
Okay.
It's very invasive.
Yeah.
I've been trying to remove it from my lawn area for years. And my neighbor had some going up a tree. It was all full. I explained to her what you just said.
Yeah.
And she had a tree man look at it, and he said, no, it's fine.
I will have another social media post about it. We did one a couple of years ago, but I recently came across a pine tree that had recently snapped over that had ivy growing up it, and that's where I saw that behind the bark was this dense layer of ivy roots.
Yep.
Like it had actually penetrated and was just pulling everything out of the tree, and it weakens the tree. So we'll do another public outreach campaign soon.
All right, great, thanks.
I did not know they did that.
I'm gonna have to check on my pine trees.
So we're going to finish up with Cranberry Watershed?
Yes, and...
Cranberry Watershed.
Oh yeah, updates, there we are. Share my screen again. Oh, I'm already there, never mind, sorry. Adrian Wegman, Natalie, former Commissioner Natalie's husband, works at the Cranberry Station at USDA.
Oh.
I reached out to him first, just sort of asking for some advice, you know, looking forward with the potential for eventually purchasing the Carrera Bog property, just trying to, you know, pitch some ideas about different ways that a couple of those bogs might be able to be maintained over time. And while we were talking, he said they were working on a project trying to test a new early frost warning system for bogs, and what they were looking for was a recently retired bog to put sensors out on, temperature sensors. And so I thought of the Albertini section of Cranberry Watershed Preserve, because that was farmed up to, I think, 2015 maybe. And we went out and did a quick look, and he said, yeah, this looks great. So I said, send me a picture of what you'd be installing and how it would work, so I can make sure it fits all of our guidelines. And he did that, and it looks like it works. So I said, go ahead, I'll give the commission an update and tell them that you're gonna go out there and do that. So this is what it will look like. Just a piece of PVC with a wire attached to it, a little stake whacked into the bog. They're gonna put them out into the middle of the bog to make them a little less likely that somebody will mess with them. But I think they were only putting a couple of them out there anyways, so it's pretty minimally invasive. It's not gonna cause any issues with our property, and our property gets to further science for
Super.
local growers, which is cool. So just wanted to not ask for permission, because I already told him it was fine, because it fits, you know, our guidelines, but wanted to bring it up in case the commission had questions or concerns or things they would want to see.
Does the commission have any questions or concerns?
No, it's really good.
Thanks, thanks, Matt.
No problem.
I have a question about something that we sent out an order of conditions for. The person, I believe it was Ring Road, who dumped stuff down onto Cranberry Bog.
Yes.
According to the owner of the Cranberry Bog, nothing has been done.
Yeah, he stopped by the office and left his phone number, and I called him back, and it said this voicemail box is full or not set up or whatever. So I've just been waiting to hear back from him. But he said something about trees being dumped on his bog. I didn't get the full story because I didn't speak with him, but I'll definitely look into it.
Okay.
There's kind of a slew of older orders of conditions or enforcement orders that require review. So we'll be doing that, and we may be bringing back some old things in front of the board, so that rather than me reaching out and being told, oh, well, I can't really do that now, there are a few things that we dealt with under enforcement that we did not, once a solution was chosen, we did not put a deadline on it.
Ah.
So that doesn't really give me the authority to make them do it, but I think the answer in those situations is to just send an email and say, this is going to be discussed at the blank Conservation Commission meeting.
Yeah.
Be there to discuss. And that allows the commission to hear what's been done or not done, hear any hardships and make a decision on an actual hard deadline or else fines. So that'll be upcoming.
Okay.
Since there are no public hearings scheduled for this session, we're going to move to closing remarks. The next meeting will be held April 10, 2024, starting at 6:30 p.m. The time is now 8:01 p.m. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Thank
Second.
you, Megan. Second. Thank you, Dot. Dot?
Yes?
Marilyn?
Yes.
Megan?
Yes.
And Kalina's a yes. That makes it unanimous. Thank you, Commissioners. See you next time.